Venezuela's Attorney General opens a criminal investigation into Juan Guaido for his links with Colombian paramilitaries. Hurricane-battered Bahamas might face a tropical storm over the weekend. And the family of the late Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe gives in to the government's request to bury him in the capital. Hello and welcome to Telesur. I'm Doris Polo in Quito, and this is From the South. We begin in Venezuela, where the Interior Minister Nestor Ribeiro asked the Public Prosecutor's Office to begin an investigation into the opposition figure Juan Guaido for his alleged links with right-wing paramilitaries in Colombia. On Wednesday, video emerged of Guaido being escorted over the border by members of the Rastrojos group.
Guaido's crossing into Colombia in February this year was an extraction operation by Colombian narco-paramilitaries. They provided him with security and escorts to cross the border from La Palmita in the Venezuelan state of Táchira to Puerto Santander in Colombia. The paramilitaries placed these communities under a 24-hour curfew to avoid Guaido being seen. That was part of the agreement. All this evidence of a direct link between Guaido and the top leaders of this paramilitary organization in Colombia, the Rastrojos, is further proof of his connection with all the terrorist acts planned against Venezuela to attack its democratic stability and peace. The government will hand all the evidence over to prosecutor's office so they can begin the appropriate investigations and serve justice.
The video referred to was filmed on the 23rd of February this year. It shows Guaido running across the border bridge from Venezuela into Colombia. He's escorted by a group of men who have been identified as members of the Rastrojos, a Colombian paramilitary group that operates in the region. At the time, Guaido was under a court order not to leave Venezuela. Venezuela's Attorney General accepted the minister's request and confirmed the investigation.
Faced with the serious evidence already made public globally in recent hours regarding Juan Guaido's ties to the narco-paramilitary group known as Los Rastrojos, the prosecutor's office has decided to open a criminal investigation.
The appearance of Juan Guaido with paramilitaries has been causing waves in Colombia too. Our correspondent Jose Manuel Jimenez reports from Bogota.
Reactions here in Colombia to these pictures of Juan Guaido were not slow in coming. Senator Paloma Valencia of the governing Democratic Center Party said that public figures never know when their photo will be taken or with who, as a way of trying to justify those images released by the Venezuelan government and which have been circulating widely on social media. But we've also heard the commander of the Colombian army, General Nicasio Martinez, saying the same thing about public figures not being able to control who they're filmed with. At the time that Guaido made his secret crossing into Colombia on the 23rd of February, many people said that the border in that area was controlled by paramilitaries, by groups like the Rastrojos. And the human rights defender Hernán Canizares says that paramilitary groups declared an armed stoppage in the area at that time. General Martinez also said that he and the army had no knowledge of or role in Guaido crossing the border, which raises the question, what is the army doing on the border if it's not carrying out its constitutional mission to guard Colombia's frontiers? The army head in fact indicated that it was other bodies that carried out the operation. So that raises another question: which organizations of the Colombian state or some other foreign intelligence agencies were supporting that operation, and what is their relationship with this paramilitary group? And also, why has Guaido himself not been able to explain the video? These are questions that many people here in Colombia are asking.
Venezuela's Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza has publicly condemned the U.S. sanctions against his country at a United Nations meeting in Geneva.
The unilateral coercive measures not only since the moment they are applied, but immediately after they are announced, cause a violation of human rights of citizens, and the United Nations should reject this. The mere existence of those sanctions, which are completely outside of international law. We proposed that the Human Rights Commission, that the aspiring members or current members, if they want to be accepted inside it, should ensure that they do not apply or have applied unilateral coercive measures, and even that, they rejected them altogether. Any country that does not condemn these sanctions is an accomplice.
Earlier on, we sat down with senior economist Pedro Pais to discuss the far-reaching effects of the U.S. blockade on Venezuela and other countries.
First of all, you have the violation of the human rights of people, including kids. Remember the interview 20 years ago to Madeleine Albright saying it is justified to kill 500,000 kids in Iraq because in the name of democracy and freedom. And the same is today. What is the cost for Cuba of these decades and decades of economic blockage? What is the cost for Iran? What is the cost of the disturbances in terms of not only the standards of living, but also in terms of health, in terms of some vulnerabilities, even facing natural catastrophes? You have to pay attention to this situation in terms of the geo-economy and the logistics of the international trade. If you put this in the context of the international war, the international commercial war, the currency war, the financial war, you have a full distortion of the so-called free market. Right now, the WTO, the World Trade Organization, is totally futile, is totally unuseful because with the bullying policies of the United States, you have a distortion of all the chain values that includes even enterprises in the United States.
We'll take a short break now. When we come back, Mexico wants the U.S. to stop arms from entering its territory. Join us again for details in a minute. Welcome back. In the Bahamas, tropical storm warnings are in effect for the northwest, as a new storm has already brought rain and strong winds to the hurricane-battered islands. The tropical disturbance, now hovering over central Bahamas, is packing winds of 45 kilometers per hour and is expected to drop 2 to 4 inches of rain through to Sunday. It could also threaten some of the northernmost islands of the Bahamas that were recently devastated by Hurricane Dorian. It's the type of weather those areas do not need, as rescue teams are still searching for hundreds of persons registered as missing. There's an 80% chance that will turn into a stronger tropical depression or even a tropical storm named Humberto in the next days, and it could become a hurricane when it moves to the southeast coast of the U.S. While there is growing concern over the weather system near the Bahamas, there is a second tropical wave in the Atlantic that forecasters are keeping an eye on. This is the same feature that emerged off the northwest African coast earlier this week. Early Friday morning, there were no signs of organization with this Cabo Verde system, but there is plenty of time for that to occur. Forecasters expect this disturbance to become better organized early next week as it approaches the Lesser Antilles. Now, while the Caribbean has made only a minor contribution to global climate change, the region is on the front line of the massive risks and devastation it is causing. This concern was raised by Barbados Prime Minister Mia Mottley, who was at the Diamond Ball hosted by Barbadian pop icon Rihanna on Thursday evening.
I don't believe that the whole question of halting or reversing climate change is beyond human ingenuity, and I'm going to speak about it tonight. And therefore I think that as a world, as a global community, we need to be able to invest in it. And equally for us in the Caribbean, very often we're invisible to most people, but we say that we are needed in the battle because we are on the front line. We didn't cause this battle, but we are the first victims to be affected, us and the Arctic and Antarctic summer sheets in Greenland. And we need 1.5 degrees as a cap in order to survive, but the world is already talking about 2 degrees. So those are the kinds of battles that we're fighting, and Rihanna really has been holding her hands on a number of these issues. You hear her voice on what's happening in the Amazon, you hear her voice on Dorian, And this is not going to stop. Every month you're hearing about a different climatic event, every week in fact. And I don't know when everybody's going to wake up and realize this is real. This is not a dream. This is not a projection. This is what we are living.
The Monitoring Committee of Barbados Economic and Recovery Transformation Program, referred to as BERT, has expressed concern about a number of delays in key projects designed to boost the economy. BERT was introduced last year in a bid to revive the island's economy. However, there have been setbacks with the Sandal Beaches, Blue Horizon and Hyatt-centric hotel projects. This could have an effect on the country's overall growth. At the same time, the BERT Committee's latest report shows Barbados' foreign reserves were a healthy $938 million. That's way ahead of a target of $893 million. And public institutions' arrears stood at $185 million, leaving plenty of wiggle room for a target, or from a target rather, of $284 million. Both Dominica and Antigua and Barbuda are expected to finally receive funds from the Caribbean Strong Concert, which was put on in 2017 to assist with relief efforts after the destruction caused by Hurricanes Irma and Maria. Concert organizer and chairman of the Dominica Antigua Relief Fund, Darwin Telemac, says the first payout will be given to the Barbuda Council and Dominican Tourism Minister next week. 2 years ago, regional artists performed in those concerts across several islands toward that relief. To date, the money has not been distributed. Antigua's Prime Minister Gaston Brown had called on the show's organizers to hand over the funds collected.
And yes, they're terrorists.
Now that Guyana's house-to-house registration process has ended, the Elections Commission, GCOM, is preparing for its extended claims and objections exercise. The names of about 300,000 persons collected during the month-long house-to-house registration exercise is to be merged with the existing National Register. Next is the claims and objections period, but that will only begin when the preliminary list of electors is extracted from the merged list. Claims and objections will allow eligible persons who will be 18 by the end of October to be registered. Individuals who may have changed their names or addresses can also utilize this period.
I really want to implore citizens to ensure that they have those documents ready, particularly those who have never been registered before. You're a Guyanese citizen by birth, descent, naturalization, or registration. You will be 18 years and older by the 31st of October 2019, or you're a citizen of a Commonwealth country living in Guyana for a period of no less than 1 year preceding the 31st of October. So once you have met any of those criteria, you're eligible to use the claims and objections exercise to ensure that you're registered so that you will be on the official list of electors.
Meanwhile, Guyana's government, through the AG's office, has filed in the courts a stay in GCOM's decision to merge new data gathered during the recently ended registration exercise with those on the existing National Register. We'll keep you updated on that development.
21 persons, 18 voted in favor.
In other news, activists took their climate change concerns to the doorstep of President Donald Trump with a protest outside the White House. Hundreds of youth protesters led by Swedish teen activist Greta Thunberg gathered across the street from the White House carrying signs reading "People or Profit" and "Warning," while chanting "This is a crisis, act like it." Thunberg is on a 6-day visit to Washington intended to pressure the Trump administration ahead of a UN climate summit in New York later this month. The teen activist will participate in a global strike next Friday.
But I'm just going to say that I'm so incredibly grateful for every single one of you, and I'm so proud of you who have come here, and it's a lot of people, a lot more than I think anyone had expected, and I was in the back, so I didn't see anything but the nearest meter, so this is very overwhelming, and to just never give up. We will continue, and see you next week on September 20th.
Mexico has asked the United States government to do more to stop the illegal trafficking of weapons into its territory.
Mexico's foreign minister revealed that Mexico asked the United States government to give arms trafficking the same priority that they are giving to the migration issue.
We stated that the goal of Mexico will be to end arms trafficking on the border. Our goal is not to reduce it, but to end it. And for that, we need the involvement of the U.S. authorities.
During the morning press conference, Ebrard, who's in charge of foreign policy, revealed that a binational commission has been created to address the problems that contributes to the illegal entry of weapons into Mexico from the U.S. side of the border.
Mexico will be publishing monthly reports on how many weapons linked to crimes in Mexico come from the United States, so that we can have a reference on how this is going to decrease and we can achieve the goal of ending arms trafficking.
In the meeting that was held with officials from the White House to evaluate the progress of the agreement on migration that was signed on the 7th of June and that ultimately stopped the plan by the Trump administration to impose tariffs on Mexican goods, Ebrard put on the table his country's concern about the trafficking of illegal arms and concerns about the wave of shootings and massacres that are happening in the United States, something which worries Mexican citizens.
Fortunately, here in Mexico there are cases, but there is not much information about that. To avoid those kind of cases, there has to be control over the weapons that enter the country.
According to official figures, every year 200,000 weapons enter Mexican territory, 70% coming from the United States, 41% of them originating from the state of Texas, where in early August, 8 Mexicans were killed in mass shooting.
There are close to 10,000 armories in the regions bordering Mexico, and everyone can easily access weapons there because you don't need many requirements. You can just go to a gun shop and buy a gun. This is so because of the laws on the buying and selling of weapons. These laws are a result of the influence of the North American National Rifle Association.
Those guns end up in hands of the organized crime groups, and since the implementation of the Cold War against drug trafficking, they have triggered a wave of violence that has resulted in an average of 2,500 murders every month since the start of 2019.
Coming up after the break, 7 people have been murdered by an Islamist group in Nigeria. Join us again after this. Welcome back. Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe will be buried in the capital's National Heroes Acre monument in around 30 days. Mugabe's family has settled the row with the government over his burial site. This burial, or the burial, will however take place at a later date, possibly in a month's time. This would allow time for a shrine to be constructed at the Heroes Acre monument. Ahead of this, a public funeral service will be held on Sunday in the capital, followed by a ceremony at Mugabe's home village. The former president's body started 3 days of lying in state on Thursday.
He will go to Zimba, for the people in Zimba to pay their last respect. Then he will be brought back and be kept somewhere up until when the burial place is complete. I think the complication came when the traditional leaders had not confirmed where they were going to bury him, and I think that is what caused this whole, if you want to call it, uncertainty. But now the clarity is there. From this morning, we know he's now going to be buried at Heroes Acre.
In South Africa, hundreds of protesters have marched outside the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, calling on companies to do more to stop gender-based violence in the workplace. Activists also presented a document called the Santon Shutdown Statement, in which they demanded that companies, especially in the private sector, amend their sexual harassment policies and contribute at least 2% of their annual earning to tackle violence against women and children. According to the World Health Organization, about 3,000 women in South Africa were murdered in 2018.
most incidences of gender-based violence that happen in the workplace come from the private sector, and it remains silent because they don't do anything about it. They don't have the necessary policies within their environment in order to deal with those things. So we want them to do better and not be silent. Like, wearing black and having a moment of silence is not enough for you to do. Like, you need to do more. You've got the money. We know you have the money. So do what you need to do in order to help us fight gender-based violence in this country.
Our correspondent, Matuba Malatji, has the details from the protest in Johannesburg.
Hundreds of women here in South Africa have gathered in the continent's richest square mile here in Sandton. This is the economic hub of the country where they are protesting against gender-based violence. In recent days, we've seen gruesome cases of gender-based violence where most women would be killed by their intimate partners or would be in danger in the most public spaces. And today they are here to tell the world that enough is enough, which is the hashtag they've been using to say enough is enough, enough killing of women and children, because they are the most vulnerable in the violent society that is South Africa. Yet just yesterday we saw crime stats being released, and they confirm what these women are doing here, which is the high rate of violent crime that is perpetrated mostly against women and children. And now they're here at the stock exchange handing over a memorandum of their demands from the capitalist country that South Africa is to enforce somehow laws or use their influence to influence policy that will protect the most vulnerable people in society, which are women and children. And that is what's happening on this Friday afternoon in South Africa, Johannesburg in Sandton. It's back to you, studio.
That was Matuba Malaji with that report. An armed Islamist group in Nigeria has killed 6 soldiers and a civilian militia leader. 3 attacks were carried out in the Guaido region of the northeastern state of Borno. Members of the community turned out to mourn the civilian leader and carried his body through the streets. Borno has been at the center of violence triggered by the Boko Haram group, but splits mean there are now other Islamist groups fighting in the region.
We are not going to say anything, just provide us with more security. If not, we are going to leave. The community wants more security.
With only 2 days to go before millions of people in Tunisia head to the polls to choose a new president, the country's electoral body has declared itself ready to hold the polls. More than 7 million voters are expected to take part in the elections on Sunday, September 15th. 26 candidates, including the Prime Minister Youssef Chahid, are vying for the top job. The election is the second since the fall of longtime leader Ben Ali in the uprising of 2011. In France, metro workers in Paris have gone on strike over President Emmanuel Macron's pension reforms. Under the measures, many of the workers' retirement privileges have been cut, such as allowing train drivers and other underground workers to retire at 52. 10 out of the 16 metro lines in Paris and 2 major regional train lines were shut down, forcing commuters to find alternative ways to get to work. Macron's government is set to merge 42 different pension systems into a single points-based one.
They can't take away our social benefits like that. I've been working for almost 25 years for this company. Soon I'll be 50. I don't want to work until I'm 70. Getting up at 4 in the morning, it's very hard. So today we speak for all RATP network workers.
Firefighters in Indonesia continue battling forest fires across several of its islands. Indonesia has sent thousands of security personnel to help contain the flames, while the government has closed plantations operated by at least 30 companies to save them from the blaze. Yet the state has brought criminal charges against 4 of those companies in relation to the fires. A boat capsized during a religious ceremony in central India, killing 12 people. The National Disaster Response Force said they are searching for 1 more person. The boats carrying 20 to 25 people tipped over in Bhopal just as they were about to immerse an idol of the Hindu elephant god Ganesh. This week marks the end of the Ganesh Chaturthi festival, also known as Vinayaka Chaturthi, when colorfully decorated idols of Ganesh are immersed in water. That brings us to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Doris Polo. Thank you for watching.